As I said in an earlier video, the mobility is really built around the joints. The joints is how we focus how we're moving in different ways. And as such, there are 14 joints. Now, of course, there are actually many more joints than this in the human body, but we want to simplify it and categorize it in an easy way that makes it very simple to do. Now, we could go into all the different joints in the hands, but we don't really need to do that. So here I have listed the 14 joints, and it's broken up here, how it's broken up in the modules of this course. So we have the lower body joints, the kind of spine through neck area, and then the upper body, the shoulders through the arms. So in the lower body, we have the toes, the ankles, the knees, and the hips. In the middle body, we have the pelvis, the spine is an interesting one because I really like to group it all together, but anatomically it is divided between the lumbar spine, which is the low spine, the thoracic spine, which is the mid spine, and the cervical spine, which is really the neck. We have these different segments of the spine. The reason I like to think of it as the full spine is because while this categorization is great for learning, you'll see when I went to more full body and really thinking as the spine with all these individual joints, all these individual segments in it, it opened up some new ways of working with the spine. So I have it subdivided here. We're going to go through it here, and we'll get to that really full spine way of looking at things that I like to do. So once again, pelvis, lumbar spine, thoracic spine, cervical spine, aka neck, and then the jaw. The jaw is a joint that is often forgotten about, but it can be a really important one to work with, especially since a lot of people carry tension in the jaw, and if there's tension there can be tension in other places. Now the upper body, we have the scapula, the shoulders. Sometimes these are grouped together, but I like to separate them because really we are working with some different things. The scapula being that kind of shoulder blade thing and what's moving here versus the ball and socket joint that is the actual shoulder itself. So scapula, shoulders, elbows, wrists, and fingers. And you see I have a pretty picture of a person standing with arms overhead right here. And I do this, and I want you to pay attention to the red lines. This is important. Zoom in a little bit. So this is important because of this X pattern that we see in the body. It corresponds from here, the right leg crosses through to the left arm, and the left leg crosses through to the right arm. You'll see these dots which correspond to these different joints, right? In a way, the toes correspond to the fingers, the ankles to the wrists, the knee to the joint, the hip to the shoulder, and it gets a little blurry, so here really it's kind of the shoulder scapula joint would be the hip, then the pelvis corresponds to the neck, the lumbar to the thoracic. So we have this mapping across of the body, and this is important to understand for the neurological reasons. If you have pain in your shoulder, yes, it could be a problem in the shoulder, and working mobility with that is going to open it up, but working the opposite side hip may actually improve it, or down the chain it can go. Working with the opposite side ankle, for instance, opens it up. So for this reason, it's important to not always just focus on where a pain or injury or what we're trying to improve happens to be, but understanding that the body is fully connected in these different ways. So we want to expand our movement everywhere, and that helps to further expand things. There's a time and a place to specialize on one joint, but realize if you're neglecting everything else, then that's really going to be holding you back. So this is important to realize, and also that these joints really correspond in different ways. The fingers move much like the toes. You have a whole bunch of different joints there. Obviously our fingers, because we use them so much more, are very much more mobile. But people that don't have hands, for instance, right, they can actually learn to be the prehensility of the feet, being able to grasp things and that such. That can be built up. We're not going to go that far with the mobility of the toes in this, but it can be done. The ankle is a very similar joint to the wrist here. The knee joint, that hinge joint, very similar to the elbow. Then we have the ball and socket of the hip, and the ball and socket of the shoulder having more mobility, but they are a similar type of joint. So it's really interesting to see how that mapping across of the joints work. And as I said, it's important to understand neurological function and just plain our ability to move.